The sun was warm on Finn's neck, a nice change from the damp, cold places he remembered from his old life. He stood on the putting green of a golf course that was too fancy for his liking. The air smelled of cut grass and money. He was here for a charity event, one of those things you do because a buddy asked, and because it was for a good cause, helping other veterans. He shifted his weight, feeling out of place in the stiff polo shirt. He missed the worn fabric of his gear. People moved around him, laughing and talking. Most were civilians, successful folks who wanted to do something good and have a nice day out. Finn respected that. He kept to himself mostly, nodding at the other veterans he recognized. His eyes, though, were always watching, always assessing. Old habits. They didn't see a threat on a golf course, but he couldn't turn the instinct off. It was just how he was wired now. That's when he noticed the younger man. He was built like a brick house, with a confident walk that tried too hard. He was talking loudly to a small group, gesturing with his hands. Finn caught snippets of conversation, something about logistics and insertions. The words were technically right, but the way he said them felt like he was reading from a movie script. Finn looked away. Every community has its blowhards. The man spotted Finn, or more likely, spotted the quiet, coiled spring look that former operators often carry. He broke from his group and walked over, hand already outstretched. "Hey, brother," the young man said, his voice booming. "Jason, good to see another team guy out here." Finn shook his hand. The grip was strong, but showy. "Finn," he said, his own voice quiet and flat. "Finn? No way. You're the Master Chief, Grim Riley?" "Man, I've heard stories," Jason said, his eyes widening with a performance of respect. "I was with Team 4. Did a stint over in the sandbox myself." Finn just nodded again, a non-committal grunt in his throat. He didn't remember this Jason. The teams were big, and guys moved around. It was possible. But something in his gut, that same instinct that had kept him alive on a dozen dark nights, twitched. It wasn't the boastful talk. He'd heard that before. It was something else, something he couldn't place. "Man, it's a bit chilly for this, huh?" Jason said, and started to pull off his blue windbreaker. He struggled with the sleeve for a second, rolling it up his forearm, and then Finn saw it. The tattoo was large, wrapping around Jason's left forearm. It was centered on the Navy SEAL trident, the eagle, anchor, and pistol. It was well done, the lines clean. But it was what was woven into the trident that stopped the air in Finn's lungs. Incorporated into the design, where others might have a date or a name, was a unique, intricate emblem. A stylized skull, not a cartoonish one, but sharp and angular, with a single, jagged lightning bolt piercing it from temple to jaw. The detail was exact, the specific number of teeth, the slight crack in the bone near the eye socket. Finn knew that emblem. He knew the curve of every line. He had seen it drawn on a dusty notebook in a cramped forward base. He had seen it etched onto a piece of gear. He had seen it, for the last time, stenciled on a helmet that never came home. It was Leo's. Leo Spectre Vance, his teammate, his friend. A man who had bled out in his arms 5 years ago on a mountainside so far from home, it didn't even have a name on their maps. That insignia was Leo's private mark. He had designed it himself. It was never an official badge, never approved by any command. It was a piece of personal art, a silent signature shared only among their tiny, closed circle. After Leo died, they had all quietly retired it. It was theirs to remember and theirs to protect, and now it was inked permanently on the arm of a loud, smiling stranger at a charity golf tournament. The noise of the event, the laughter, the clink of glasses, the distant thwack of a golf ball, all of it faded into a dull, roaring silence. Finn's world shrank to the space between him and that tattoo. His face, usually an unreadable mask, went utterly still. His eyes, a pale gray, locked onto the design with an intensity that was physical, like a weight. Jason was still talking, something about his golf swing, but Finn didn't hear a word. The question screamed in his mind, loud and clear, blotting out everything else. Asterisk, who approved that insignia? Asterisk, who gave this kid the right? Did he serve with Leo in some other unit? No, impossible. Did he know Leo's family? Had he seen it somewhere? But the gut feeling, that cold, sick twist in his stomach, told him the answer was worse. The symbol wasn't just on Jason's arm. It was a ghost, a piece of a sacred memory slapped on like a bumper sticker. It felt dirty. It felt stolen. Jason finally noticed Finn's silence. He followed the older man's gaze down to his own tattoo. A flicker of pride, then confusion, passed over his face. Oh, the ink? Yeah. Had it done after my last deployment. Means a lot, you know. Finn forced himself to breathe. He unclenched his jaw, which he hadn't realized was tight. He gave Jason one last, long look not at his face, but at the tattoo. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked away, his steps slow and deliberate, leaving Jason standing alone on the green, looking confused. Finn walked past the clubhouse, past the parked cars. He didn't stop until he was in the quiet solitude of the parking lot. He leaned against his truck, the sun still warm, but he felt cold inside. The image of the tattoo burned behind his eyes. This wasn't about stolen valor, not in the simple way people talked about it. This was different. This was a theft he couldn't understand. He needed to know how a piece of his dead friend's soul ended up as a conversation piece on a golf course. And he was going to find out. The silence in Finn's truck was heavy. It wasn't the peaceful quiet he liked on a long drive. This was a thick, thinking quiet, full of the image burned into his mind, that tattoo. He sat for a long time, just gripping the steering wheel, staring at the golf course gate, but not really seeing it. His first move was instinct, not a plan. He pulled out his phone. It wasn't a fancy new one. He opened a simple messaging app used by a very specific group of people. His thumbs moved slowly, typing a question to a few of the guys. He kept it short. Asterisk ever serve with a guy named Jason? Says he was with 4. Big guy loud? Know him? Asterisk. He put the phone down on the passenger seat and started the engine. The drive home felt longer than usual. The familiar streets seemed like they were behind a fog. Every traffic light gave him another few seconds to see that skull and lightning bolt, perfectly copied. His phone buzzed just as he pulled into his driveway. One reply from a buddy who was now working overseas. Asterisk, nope. Name doesn't ring any bells. Checked with a pal from 4, too. Negative dot asterisk, another buzz. Negative here, Grim. Doesn't sound familiar. A third message, this one with a bit more edge to it. Asterisk, that name's not in the family, brother. You sure you heard him, right? Asterisk. Finn sat in his darkening driveway, the dashboard lights casting a soft glow. The answers weren't a surprise, but they closed the door. The official story was falling apart. Jason wasn't just someone from a different unit he hadn't met. He was a ghost in the system. But that tattoo, that was the key. That was the personal, impossible detail. That wasn't something you could look up online. You couldn't find it in a book of military symbols. It was a piece of hand-drawn art from a lost friend's notebook. The how of it was a mystery that made a dull anger start to burn in Finn's chest, right next to the old grief. He got out of the truck and went into his house. It was neat, quiet. He didn't turn on many lights. He went to a small desk in the corner of the living room, not an office, just a place he kept a few important things. He opened a drawer and took out a small, worn photograph. It was a group picture, 6 men in gear, tired but smiling in the harsh sun of some desert outpost. One of them had his arm around Finn's shoulders, Leo. He had a sharp grin and kind eyes. The kind of guy who could make you laugh even when things were bad. Looking at the photo, Finn knew what he had to do next. It was a hard call to make, but it was the only one that made sense. He had to talk to Leo's wife. He found her number in his phone. He hadn't called it in a long time. You want to give people space to live their new lives. Her name was Claire. Seeing her name on the screen made his throat feel tight. He took a deep breath and pressed call. The phone rang a few times. He almost hung up, feeling like he was about to stir up pain for no good reason. Then her voice came on, warm but cautious. "Hello? Claire. It's Finn. Finn Riley." He said it softly, a pause. "Finn. Oh, wow. It's good to hear your voice." She sounded surprised, but not unhappy. "It's good to hear yours too," he said, and he meant it. "How are you? How are the kids?" They talked for a few minutes about simple things. School, work, the weather. It was normal talk, but there was a weight underneath it, the shared memory of the man who wasn't there. Finn could hear it in her voice, the same way he felt it in his own. Finally, he couldn't put it off. "Claire, I'm sorry to bring something up. It's going to sound strange. It's okay, Finn. What is it?" "I was at an event today. I met a guy, younger guy. He had a tattoo, a big one, with a seal trident." He paused, trying to find the right words. But inside the trident, he had Leo's mark, the skull with the lightning bolt. The silence on the other end of the line was total. It wasn't a confused silence. It was a silence of recognition and of shock. "Claire? You there?" Her voice came back, quieter now. "You're sure? Exactly his? The one he drew?" "Positive. Every detail. The crack near the left eye socket. The 7 teeth on top. All of it." He heard her take a shaky breath. "Oh, Finn. Did you ever share that? Maybe with a family member? Or for a memorial or something?" "No," she said, and her voice was firmer now, sure. "Never. That was his. From his journal. You guys were the only ones who knew it. After he died, I put all his personal notebooks and drawings in a box. I couldn't bear to look at them for the longest time. That box. It's in my attic, Finn. It hasn't been opened in years." The mystery deepened. If the design was locked away in an attic, how did it get onto a stranger's arm 1,000 miles away? The idea that this Jason guy had actually known Leo, had served with him, was now completely gone. This was something else, the only other thing. Claire started, then stopped. "After the funeral, when his mom was helping me sort things, there were a few storage units. We had to clear out an old one he rented near the base before we were married. It was just full of old gear, uniforms, some random stuff. We didn't have the heart to go through it all, piece by piece. We sold the contents of that unit. Just told the guy at the storage place to sell it all to pay the back fees. We didn't want to see it. A storage unit. Sold off to a stranger." Finn pictured it. A stranger buying a locker full of a dead man's life, sorting through it, maybe finding a notebook with a cool drawing inside. "I think that's it," Finn said, his voice low. "I think someone found his drawing." "That was his," Claire whispered, and now she was crying, not loud sobs, but the soft, tired tears of an old wound being torn open. That was his private thing. It wasn't for sale. Hearing her cry, the anger in Finn hardened into something cold and solid. This wasn't just a lie anymore. This was a violation. A man he called brother had his most personal symbol turned into a decoration for a fake. The grief for Leo mixed with a new, fierce need to protect his memory. "It's okay, Claire," he said, though it wasn't okay at all. "I'm going to take care of this." He hung up a few minutes later, after promising to call her again soon. The quiet house felt different now. It wasn't just a place to rest. It was a base of operations. The puzzle was coming together, and the picture it made was ugly. Jason was a liar, but the path of the tattoo led back to carelessness and blind luck. Finn knew what he had to do next. He couldn't let this slide. He had to look this kid in the eye and find out exactly what story he was telling and where he got the right to tell it. Finn didn't look for a fight. He looked for the truth. He spent the next few days asking careful questions in the right places. He found out where the young man Jason liked to spend his evenings. It was a sports bar on the other side of town, a place with too many big screens and loud music. Finn drove there on a Thursday night. He didn't wear anything special, just a plain shirt and jeans. He didn't want to stand out. He wanted to be a ghost, just for a little while, to watch. He parked his truck down the street and walked to the bar. The noise hit him first shouts over a football game, the thump of a bass line from the speakers. He stood near the doorway, his eyes scanning the dim room. It didn't take long to find him. Jason was at the center of a long table, holding a beer. He was talking, his arms moving in big, sweeping motions. 4 or 5 other guys, younger, in polo shirts, were leaning in, listening with wide eyes. They looked like they worked in offices. They were hanging on his every word. Finn leaned against the wall near the restrooms, partly in shadow. He listened. The words were the same as on the golf course. High pressure op. My team. The intelligence was sketchy. They were generic terms, phrases you could pick up from a movie. But they were enough to impress the men at the table, who nodded along, asking questions. Finn watched Jason's face. He saw the pride there, the enjoyment of being the center of attention. He didn't see the haunted look, the 1,000-yard stare that sometimes flashed in the eyes of men who had really been there. He saw a performer. Finn's stomach felt like a stone. This wasn't just a kid making up stories. He was building an entire fake life on the backs of real sacrifices. And on his arm, covered by his sleeve now, was the stolen symbol of a man who had paid the real price. Finn waited. He waited until Jason got up to go to the bar for another round. Finn moved then, smoothly, cutting through the crowd. He reached the bar just as Jason was handing over cash. "We need to talk," Finn said, his voice low but clear, right next to Jason's ear. Jason jumped, turning quickly. When he saw Finn, his expression flashed from surprise to confusion, then to a forced, nervous smile. "Oh, hey. Master Chief Riley, right? From the tournament. You following me?" He tried to make it a joke, but his voice was tight. "Outside," Finn said. It wasn't a request. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't glare. He just looked at Jason with a calm, empty expression that was more frightening than any shout. The smile on Jason's face melted away. He glanced back at his table of friends, then at the bartender. He was looking for an escape, but there wasn't one. Finn's presence was like a wall. "Yeah, okay, sure." Finn turned and walked toward the side exit, not checking to see if Jason followed. He knew he would. The cool night air outside was a relief after the stuffy bar. They were in a dimly lit alley next to the dumpsters. The sound of the bar was a muffled thump behind the brick wall. Jason stepped out, crossing his arms. He was trying to look tough, but his eyes were darting around. "What's this about, man?" Finn didn't answer right away. He just looked at him, letting the silence grow. Finally, he pointed a finger, not at Jason's face, but at his left arm. "Roll up your sleeve." Jason's arms tightened across his chest. What? Why? The tattoo. Show it to me. Look, I don't know what your problem is, Jason started, his voice getting louder. Finn took one small step forward. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a shift in energy, a focusing of his entire attention. His voice dropped even lower. The man who designed that insignia. His name was Leo. Tell me about him. All the color drained from Jason's face. It happened so fast, it was like someone turned off a light inside him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He hadn't expected a name. He'd expected to be called a liar, maybe. But not this. Not a specific real person connected to his decoration. I don't know what you're talking about, Jason stammered, but the bravado was gone. It was a weak, automatic denial. Leo Spectre Vance, Finn said, each word like a hammer falling. Killed in action. 5 years ago. Operation Northern Watch. Tell me about the man whose art you're wearing. Jason's shoulders slumped. He looked down at his feet, then back at Finn, his eyes wide with something that looked a lot like fear, but also a deep, sudden shame. The act was over. The performance was crashing down around him, and he had no script for this. I didn't? He swallowed hard. I never met him. The truth was out. 3 words. Finn felt a cold wave wash over him. He'd known it, but hearing it was different. Where did you get the design? Finn's question was quiet now, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Jason leaned back against the brick wall, looking defeated. He spoke to the ground. I wanted a sleeve. A military one. To look tough, I guess. I told the tattoo artist I wanted something unique, a special seal thing. He said he had some cool old sketches. He showed me a folder. That one was in there. He said he bought a box of old military stuff at a storage auction a few years back. There were notebooks in it. This was drawn on a page. I thought it looked cool. I didn't know it belonged to anyone. I mean, I didn't think it was real. Finn closed his eyes for a second. The storage unit. Claire's words. It was all true. His friend's private thoughts, his drawings, had been sold for a few dollars to pay a bill, then sorted through by a stranger, and finally picked out like a piece of costume jewelry by a kid who wanted to play dress up. He opened his eyes. The anger was still there, but it had changed shape. It wasn't directed fully at this scared young man in front of him anymore. It was at the whole sad, careless chain of events. You never served, did you? Finn asked, though it wasn't really a question anymore. Jason shook his head, still not looking up. No, I tried to enlist once. Didn't make it through. I wanted people to look at me the way they look at guys like you. For the first time, Finn saw him. Not as a liar, but as a lost kid, hollow inside, trying to fill himself up with a hero's shadow. It was pathetic. And it was incredibly sad. Finn took a deep breath. That symbol, he said, nodding toward Jason's arm. You need to cover it up. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to a good man who is gone. You don't get to wear it. Jason just nodded, a quick, jerky motion. And the stories, Finn said. They stop tonight. You go back in there, and you tell your friends you're a forklift driver or an accountant. I don't care. But you don't use my friend's life or my community's sacrifice to make yourself interesting. Ever again. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked back down the alley, leaving Jason alone in the dim light, leaning against the wall, staring at the tattoo on his arm like he was seeing it for the very first time. Walking away from the alley, Finn didn't feel the sharp victory he thought he might. The heavy stone in his gut had just changed shape. It was no longer the hot, hard rock of anger. Now it was a cold, hollow weight. Grief. He got into his truck but didn't start it. He sat in the dark, the sounds of the bar fading behind him. He had gotten the truth. The kid was a fake. The tattoo was a cruel accident. He had done what he set out to do. So why did he feel so empty? Because it wasn't really about Jason. It was about Leo. And the truth he had just uncovered was more painful than a simple lie. A lie you can fight. You can expose it and watch it burn away. But this was carelessness. Leo's life, his memory, the little private pieces of himself he left behind. They had been treated like trash. Sold off in a storage locker for a few dollars. Sifted through by a tattoo artist looking for cool designs. It made Leo's sacrifice, his very identity, feel small. It made it feel cheap. That was a deeper wound, and Finn didn't know how to fix it. He drove to Claire's house the next day. It was a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. Toys were scattered in the front yard. A bicycle with training wheels lay on its side on the path. Life was going on here, a life Leo had built but couldn't stay to live. She opened the door before he could knock. Her eyes were red, but she gave him a small, brave smile. "I made coffee," she said. They sat at her kitchen table. Sunlight streamed in, falling on a child's drawing taped to the refrigerator. It was a happy, messy picture of a stick-figure family. Finn told her everything about the bar, the confrontation, the story of the storage unit, and the tattoo artist's folder. Claire listened, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time, looking out the window at her children playing in the backyard. "He loved drawing that thing," she said softly, her voice far away. "He'd doodle it everywhere. On napkins, on the margins of maps. He said it was his thinking shape. It wasn't about being tough. It was just his. A little piece of his mind he put on paper." She looked at Finn, and a tear finally escaped, tracing a slow path down her cheek. "And someone just bought it, in a box with his old socks and spare bootlaces. They didn't know him. They didn't care. They just saw a cool skull." Finn nodded. He understood exactly. That was the heart of the hurt. Not the theft, but the utter lack of meaning it had to the people who handled it. Leo had become background noise. "What do we do now?" Claire asked, wiping her cheek. "He's gone. We can't protect him from the world being careless." Finn sipped his coffee. It was strong and bitter. "Maybe we can't protect him," he said slowly, an idea beginning to form from the sadness. "But we can remember him, right? That symbol was important to us. To the people who knew him. Maybe. Maybe we take it back. Not by fighting that kid, but by remembering Leo ourselves. The right way." He looked at the drawing on the fridge. "The kids. Do they know about it? His mark?" Claire shook her head. "Not really. They know their dad was a hero. But the small stuff, the little things that made him him, that's harder to explain when they're so young." "Maybe we start there," Finn said. "Not with the big, sad story of how he died, but with the small living story of who he was." That symbol was part of that. He asked her if she still had the box from the attic. She nodded, a little hesitant. He asked if he could see it with her. Together, they went upstairs to a small, dusty attic space. She pulled down a plain cardboard box, the tape brittle and yellow. They sat on the floor, and she opened it. The smell that came out was old paper and memories. There were a few notebooks, the covers worn, some letters, a handful of photographs. And there, on top, was a small black sketchbook. Claire opened it with careful hands. On the very first page, drawn in careful, detailed ink, was the skull and lightning bolt. But around it, in the margins, were smaller doodles, a cartoon bird, a joke about the coffee, a tiny, careful sketch of Claire's smiling face. Finn felt his throat close up. This was it. This was the real thing. Not a tattoo on a stranger's arm, but a piece of a living, thinking man, surrounded by the little loves of his life. "We should show the guys," Finn said, his voice rough. "The old team. We should get everyone together. Not for a memorial. Just to look at this. To tell the stupid stories. The funny ones. To remember the man, not the myth. We put that symbol to rest on our terms. We give it back to him." Claire touched the page, her finger tracing the line of the lightning bolt. "He would have hated all the fuss," she said, a real smile touching her lips for the first time. "He'd call us all sentimental idiots." "Yeah," Finn said, smiling too, a sad but real smile. "He would. Let's do it anyway." They spent the next hour going through the box. They found a picture of Leo trying to cook a turkey in a makeshift oven and burning it to a crisp. They found a list he'd made of worst smells ever encountered, which made them both laugh until they cried. They found a dried, pressed flower he must have picked for Claire somewhere overseas. The cold, hollow weight in Finn's chest began to soften, just a little. It was being replaced by something warmer. It was still sorrow, but it was a clean sorrow, mixed with love. This was how you fought carelessness. Not with more anger, but with more care. You held the memory tight. You shared it with the people who understood its weight. He left Claire's house that afternoon feeling different. The mission had changed. The shock of the tattoo had led him here, to a dusty attic and a box of treasures. His job now wasn't to police a lie. It was to be a keeper of a truth. He needed to call the others. He needed to plan a gathering. It was time to reclaim what was theirs. The insult of the tattoo was still there. It would always sting. But it had led him back to the source, back to the real man behind the symbol. And that, he realized, was where he needed to stay. The gathering wasn't at a fancy restaurant or a big hall. Finn organized it at a quiet veterans' retreat out in the woods, a place with a few simple cabins and a big stone fireplace. It was the kind of place for quiet talks, for remembering. He called the men he had served with, the ones who had known Leo best. They came from different states, from different lives, now some contractors, some businessmen, one a firefighter. But when they stepped out of their cars and shook hands, the years just fell away. They were a team again. Claire came too, and she brought her 2 children. The boy was 6, the girl 8. They were shy at first, hiding behind her legs, looking at these serious, quiet men with big eyes. That first evening, they all sat around the crackling fire. The air was cool, smelling of pine smoke and earth. For a long time, they just talked about ordinary things, jobs, families, old cars. The kids slowly got comfortable, chasing fireflies in the darkening field nearby. Then, Claire brought out the box. She placed it on the big wooden table in the cabin. She didn't open it right away. She just put her hands on it. "Finn told you about the tattoo," she said to the room. Her voice was steady. "And he told you where it came from. This box. This is where it was supposed to stay." She opened the flaps. She took out the sketchbook and gently placed it in the middle of the table. Then, one by one, she took out the other things. The burnt turkey photo, the list of bad smells, the letters, the dried flower. She spread Leo's life out in front of them, not the heroic statue, but the living, breathing, funny man. Finn picked up the sketchbook. He opened it to the first page, to the clean, sharp drawing of the skull and lightning bolt. He turned it around so everyone could see. "We all know this," Finn said. He drew it on his helmet. He doodled it on mission plans. It was his. Just his. And now, because of a stupid, sad accident, it's out in the world on some kid's arm who didn't know him. He looked around at the faces of his friends, lit by the firelight. They were all looking at the drawing, their expressions a mix of pain and love. So tonight, we take it back. We don't do it with lawyers or threats. We do it by remembering. We put this symbol to rest right here with us. It belongs to him and to the people who loved him. That's it. No one else gets a vote. And then they began to tell stories, not the war stories you see in movies, the real ones. The time Leo tried to fix a broken generator with a piece of gum and a prayer, and it actually worked for 10 glorious minutes. The impression he did of their commanding officer, it was so perfect they had to run into the desert to laugh without being heard. The way he could remember every birthday of everyone's kids back home and would remind them to call. The cabin filled with laughter, a deep, real laughter that had tears in it. Claire laughed the hardest, hearing things about her husband she'd never known. The children listened, wide-eyed, hearing about a playful, silly side of their father they were too young to have met. One of the men, the one who was now a firefighter, reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, smooth stone from his own yard. He placed it gently on top of the open sketchbook, right beside the drawing. "For you, brother." He mumbled one by one. The others did the same. Some had stones. One had a spent brass shell casing he'd carried for years. Another put down an old, worn poker chip from a game they'd played on deployment. Claire placed the dried flower on the page. Her children, understanding this was important, ran outside and came back with 2 small, perfect pine cones, which they set down with great care. The sketchbook page was no longer just a drawing. It was an altar, covered in simple, heartfelt gifts. The symbol was surrounded, protected, by the love of the people who understood its true meaning. It was officially, solemnly, retired from the world. It was home. The next morning was clear and bright. They shared a big breakfast, the kids now chattering and playing with the men, riding on their shoulders. There were hugs and promises to not let so much time pass again. As people packed their cars, Finn's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, it's Jason, the guy from the bar. I'm getting the tattoo covered up. Starting the process next week. I found a veterans outreach program downtown. I'm going to volunteer there. To help for real. I'm sorry. Asterisk Finn read it twice. He showed it to Claire. She read it and nodded slowly. Good, she said simply. Finn typed back a short reply. Good. Thank you for letting me know. He didn't offer forgiveness. That wasn't his to give. But he acknowledged the effort. It was enough. A few days later, Finn drove alone to the National Cemetery. He walked the familiar path to a simple white headstone. He stood there for a moment in the quiet, the wind rustling the leaves of a big oak tree nearby. He didn't say anything out loud. He just reached into his pocket and took out a small, flat stone from the retreat. He bent down and placed it carefully on top of the headstone, right next to a few others, left by different visitors. He stood back up. The shock of the tattoo, the anger, the chase, the hollow feeling, it was all done now. It had been a storm that came out of nowhere, but it had washed him clean, right back to this spot, back to what mattered. The insult hadn't been erased. Somewhere, the ink was still on that young man's arm, soon to be hidden under something new. But the meaning of the symbol, the memory of the friend he missed so much, was now stronger. It had been tested, and it had held. It was guarded not by secrecy anymore, but by story, by pine cones and poker chips, and the sound of his friends laughing around a fire. Finn turned and walked back to his truck. The sun was warm on his shoulders. He had a life to live. But he carried the memory now not as a sharp, painful shard, but as something solid and whole, and finally at peace.